So first off, I want to thank everybody that's watching online and that's here in the room and everything for allowing me to speak like an American, which means I only speak one language. So it's a common joke I always say is what do you call someone that only speaks one language? An American. So thank you for allowing me to do this in English. There we go. That's different. Okay. So this talk actually is the culmination of several years of strange interactions. I joined ThoughtWorks in 2009. And a couple of our folks had written a book that was yet to be published. They were done writing it, but it hadn't been published yet, called Continuous Delivery. It's actually sitting right here on this shelf. And one of my first meetings was with one of the authors, Jez Humble, and he was talking about a product he had created for pipelines and what was continuous delivery. And I have to tell you, I got really, really excited about it and ended up being involved with that product. At almost the same time, literally 2 months apart, a guy by the name of John Allspaw was giving a talk at a Velocity conference about 10 deploys a day at Flickr. And Andrew Clay Schaefer tweeted out the term #DevOps. And to my knowledge, that's the first time the term DevOps ever was said. And some other folks picked up on it, Patrick Dubois and others, and started a conference series called DevOps Days. And so here we had continuous delivery, which is, in my estimation, kind of the bits moving through a pipeline, and DevOps, which is really more about the culture, the movement starting on different continents at the same time. And a few years later, I actually got involved with the DevOps Days movement too, and so that's where I mean by a weird combination of things, where I got to see it from both sides. And so that's where a lot of this talk comes from. Now, a lot of folks have heard this quote. A gentleman by the name of Werner Vogels, is the Chief Technology Officer for Amazon, said in an interview that they have a rule at Amazon that is, if you build it, you run it. So if you build a system or a service or whatever whatever it happens to be, you're responsible for running it. You don't get to turn it over to somebody else. It's yours. The phrase is used a lot, but unfortunately, it's taken a little bit out of context. A lot of people take this to mean that it's no responsibility or no ops, or I'm not going to have anybody else running it, or those kinds of things. It wasn't about that at all. The reason they did that is because they wanted to bring the development teams, the people creating the services, into closer contact with the customer, to get the customer feedback loop closer, so that they could improve the quality of the service, so that they could see when they made a change. Did our business efficacy, did it get better or worse? So it wasn't about the amount of operations, it was about getting more responsive to customers. And I think that detail is incredibly important for that fact. So another thing to keep in mind is that Amazon had a cloud a long time before we did. And so a lot of times we say you build it, you run it, and we're talking about that it means you have to run Kubernetes or the cloud service or manage the hundreds of Amazon things that Keith talked about earlier or so forth earlier. That's not what they did. They still built the application. They just already had a platform to run it on that most of us didn't have at the time. And a lot of us still don't, frankly. Also, I think it's important to point out, that doing something because some giant company does it is really not a good idea very often. Okay, so I mean, Amazon, Google, Netflix, Facebook, pick your company name, have interactions and problems that you probably don't. And if you do, please invite me out onto your yacht someday, because that's what they're like. And so it's not that we shouldn't learn from them. We absolutely should. But please don't do something because Amazon did it. So the spoiler was already given. The name of the talk normally is you only have to change one thing for DevOps. The catch is that it's everything. Because it's not just one, I can change this or change some automation or do what have you. It really is a holistic way of looking at things. So what I'm going to talk about today, today's agenda, if you will, is some of the things that have to change. And these things are very tightly integrated, as I hope you'll see. There's a couple slides that'll actually repeat. because it's like, okay, because we did that, we can now do this. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about team structure. If you didn't catch Keith's talk this morning where he talked more about infrastructure teams, please do, because he went into a lot more depth than I will. A little bit about architecture, a little bit about platforms, and a little bit about engineering practices. The talk is going to be very high level. There's going to be homework. So there are some slides with some books that I recommend and so forth. If you didn't watch the earlier talks today, please go back and do, because they go a lot more into depth. I'm just really going to talk about how these things interact with each other. So first off thing that I do want to say is that I think it's important to define words for your organization. So I'm going to share some definitions with you of what I think DevOps is and those sorts of things. The reason I do that is not so that you print out my definition and put it on the wall. The reason that I do that is so that for the next 45 minutes or so, when I say DevOps, you know what I mean. Okay? I encourage you to do that inside your own organization, is define, okay, when we use these terms, and DevOps, but also test-driven development. What is a unit test? What is a functional test? Okay? Define those for your organization. Am I wrong? I've heard many times here that folks that are native speakers can tell what country in Latin America that people are from because they use terms differently. I know it's true between the United States and Great Britain. I'll say something and some of my friends in UK or coworkers in UK will be like, wait, what? And so if that happens in a language we've been speaking since we were toddlers, since we were very small children, of course it's going to happen in technology. Right? So you really have to know and make sure you're on the same page as far as what the words are. So what is not DevOps? I'm going to be pretty opinionated about some of these things. There is no such thing as a DevOps tool. Sorry, product marketing people. It's just too big. Okay, so what does a DevOps tool mean? Is it collaboration? Is it testing? Is it a pipeline? Is it logging? Is it, you know what I mean? It's just too big. There's nothing wrong with needing a monitoring tool. You don't have to call it a DevOps tool. This one gets me in a lot of trouble. It is not a job title. The phrase DevOps engineer should not exist. Okay? But we need to be pragmatic and realistic. The phrase does exist. And so please, if you're looking for employment, if you're building your career and you want to put DevOps engineer on there, or that I got this DevOps training or what have you, I mean, let's be realistic. If you go and search Google for DevOps jobs, last time I checked, it was in the millions. But just keep in mind that there shouldn't be a person, or for the next thing, a team that is responsible for the DevOps. Let me go back one. Sorry, I keep hitting this too hard. Okay. So there shouldn't be a DevOps team either. And I think when I get to defining what I think DevOps is, you'll understand why I say that. It's also not a pipeline. You can have a continuous delivery pipeline. There's no such thing as a DevOps pipeline. Okay. So one of the ways that I like thinking about DevOps is as verbs and not nouns, so actions. It's not developers and operators, those people. It's developing and operating. And I know English, so hopefully people are translating that correctly, but it's the action, not the title. Why is that important? A few years ago, some security companies came out with DevSecOps because they wanted to have security included. Well, for most of us, security was always included. Okay, doing DevOps or having a DevOps culture does not excuse you from doing all the security things. But it's just like we don't call it Dev BA Ops or Dev QA Ops or Dev PM Ops. Okay, adding all of the acronyms in there just doesn't make a lot of sense. So to me, it's just DevOps. And by all means, do the security things, or you'll get on the front page of your local newspaper and you'll go out of business. Okay, so do those things, but think of it as developing and operating. And part of developing and operating is security. A gentleman by the name of John Willis wrote a blog in 2010 where he defined this DevOps as this: culture, automation, measurement, and sharing. So automation is certainly part of it. A lot of people think that's all of DevOps. No. Measurement's important because you can't improve if you don't know where you started. But notice culture and sharing are 2 out of the 4. It's 50% of it is how we work as humans. Another person, Bridget Cromhout, who did a talk one time, and I'm not sure the exact title, but I think it was something like Kubernetes is easy, people are hard. So it really is the working together that's the hard part. Some others, Jez Humble among others, preferred to add lean in there. Most of the teams I've worked on or everything are much more about value flow and lean methodologies. And so it does work in there well. So you'll see CAMs and COMs. A couple of years ago, I wrote that. Again, the reason I wrote it is because I want you to know what I mean when I say it. Some folks have adopted it. Feel free to do so. Feel free to not do so. But it's a culture where people, regardless of their title, whether you're a PA or a QA or a PM or whatever, work together to come up with the idea, to develop the idea, to deploy it, and to operate it. That's DevOps. Okay, so team structure. There is no one single thing you can change to do DevOps, as I said, but if there was, it would probably be team structure. And again, Keith talked a lot about certain types of teams, but we see this a lot in traditional organization, where you have development, that middle one should say testing, that's what I get for doing slides on an airplane. But you have a development organization, you'll sometimes have a testing organization, whether it be QA or security or whatever it is. And then you have your operations. And in between, there's these walls. And those walls are usually walls of miscommunication, where people don't know what the other folks are doing. So what happens here is that, I'm not sure if I hit this right or not. Oh, we didn't wait long enough. Sorry. He warned me, and I just didn't wait long enough. Impatient. So downstream teams rarely know what was created. So what exactly is this service? And Keith told a story earlier during his talk about the infrastructure people going, I don't care what applications they're running. And the application people saying, I don't care what the infrastructure is. But you really need to. You really need to know what it is. But more importantly, they almost never know why. Another person who should look up, it might be hard to do because it's a very common name in North America at least. A guy by the name of Jeff Smith talks about this a lot. And he says it's incredibly important that you know how your company makes money. What's your business? Your job might be writing code, but what's your business? It's important that we understand that. Okay, so I swear I only hit it once that time. Renaming operations to DevOps is not the answer. Seeing that in so many organizations. It's like, okay, all you systems people, you're now the DevOps people, and we're going to install this pipeline software and woohoo. No, that's not the answer. More likely, the answer is cross-functional teams. And I know I just scared the heck out of all the operations people. Don't worry, I'll get there. Okay, but with cross-functional teams, you want some, of course, the product knowledge, the developers, like you talked about, the team sharing responsibilities, your security folks, et cetera, at least are partially part of these teams. We're still going to have different teams, and I'll get into that a little bit more, so don't panic. But the cross-functional is important. A little bit of a spoiler. The book Continuous Delivery, that's sitting over here, would not exist if a product team or a project team in ThoughtWorks in the UK in 2006 had a cross-functional team. There was a team, and its names you've heard earlier, and you've heard me say, Jez Humble, Dan North, Sam Newman, and others were on a team at a large telecommunications company, and they were writing software, and they were writing software in Java. And they were assigned Windows laptops on which they would be developing this software. And they were told, don't worry, Sun told us that Java runs the same everywhere. We're going to be deploying to Solaris. They wrote the application, spent months doing it and everything else, finally got a production-like environment, deployed it to Solaris, and it wouldn't start. There's things that you can do on a Windows file system that you can't do on a network file system. And so it simply did not start. And so they kind of borrowed a Sun workstation from another room, set it up, and started deploying every build to it. They added a job at the end of their CI tool called Conan the Deployer, if you really want to get into details. Conan the Deployer, I know that just checked out a little bit. And so they would deploy to a production-like environment. And that's where, at least at ThoughtWorks, a lot of the thinking about continuous delivery started to come from, is the need to go into a production-like environment as often as possible. Highly recommend this book about team structures, because I'm not going to go into a lot more detail about it, called Team Topologies. Might be one of the most important books in the last couple of years. So can't recommend it enough. Matthew and Manuel are both great. So let's talk a little bit about architecture. If I have small teams, but I have this huge monolith, I still have a lot of the same problems, right? Because I might have a small team that's responsible for that library or that component, but it still can't be deployed by itself. I still can't get feedback. I still can't know if the customers got better. And so that's where we talk about these modern architectures. So microservice isn't just a buzzword. And I on purpose put lots of bullets on here. I'm not going to read them to you. You can read them or take a screenshot, whatever you want to do. But the point I want to make is it's not just a buzzword. There are rules. This is only one way to do small piece or small component systems. I'll show you a slide here in a second that matters. But I do want to drive into a couple of these that are specific to DevOps. Oops, let me go back. Okay. They're organized around business capabilities, and it's products, not projects. So what do I mean by those things? So on products, not projects, a product is something that evolves with the customers, and frankly, it ends when it's not useful. The continuous delivery tool that I worked on, that we started at ThoughtWorks 14 years ago now, the architectures of modern systems are different than that tool was designed for, and it's open source. You can still download it, but it's not actively developed anymore. That product was been surpassed by other products which are more useful for today's things. They're also solutions to business problems, not features. Don't add a button because you need a button. Add a button because it needs a problem. Solves a problem, excuse me. So when I say products and not projects, I mean everything that being a product means. That you have product managers who are looking at what your customers' needs are. They're addressing those needs, et cetera. It's not just that the feature never goes away or that the project never goes away. And then organized around business capabilities. And so in a service-oriented sort of microservice or what have you, I'll have a service that's customer management, one that's order management, and these will communicate. Another rule that happened in Amazon, again, not that you should do something because Amazon did, is the CEO said, gosh, close to 20 years ago, that teams were only allowed to communicate via APIs. So it's kind of the same thing. The services talk to themselves via something like an API. More commonly, I think at ThoughtWorks, these are event buses or so forth. But again, they can be deployed independently is the big thing. And then guess what? Those products apply to those teams. Okay, so those boundaries are around those teams, and they can then have the specialty and they can innovate and they can think about their product space because they know their customer. One of the people on my team is a woman by the name of Perla Villarreal. She gave a talk at XConf North America yesterday, talking about our ThoughtWorks radar. And she put this up there, that we have, our radar is things where we say the status of a current thing. And one of the things that we're saying is on hold, in other words, our advice is don't do this, is microservice envy. And so microservices help you with small teams and everything, but please don't build a microservice because Ken said so. Do make sure it's the right thing. Everything gets harder when you get into distributed application. So walking down failures, communication, by that I mean human communication, everything is harder. So this is not easy, it's not a silver bullet, but it is some valuable, it can help a lot of companies or people. Okay, more homework. We're reading architecture. Building Evolutionary Architectures and Building Microservices are two books I highly recommend for learning about how some of these things work, because it's a lot deeper than you're going to get in any single talk. Okay, so let's talk about continuous delivery. Let me back up here again. Okay, continuous delivery. Oh, maybe not. Jez. Okay, I shared my definition of DevOps because the people who invented the term actively refused to write one because they don't want it to become dogmatic, which I completely understand. Jez is one of the co-authors of the book Continuous Delivery, so I will share his definition of continuous delivery. The ability to get changes of all types, all. New features, configuration changes, bug fixes, and experiments into production or into the hands of users safely and quickly in a sustainable way. There's a lot of important words in there, okay? It's all changes. So configuration changes. I can bring down an entire system with a configuration change way faster than I can with a line of bad code. And I write plenty of bad code. So really, it is everything. It's into production or into the hands of users. One of the things I say quite often is it's not continuous delivery if you can't deploy to users right now. If there's not a system that you can log into and be authenticated properly and click a button and deploy, that's not continuous delivery. So deploying it onto a production-like system where users can't see it doesn't count. Might be really good automated build and test. I'm not saying you're evil if you do that, okay? But it's not continuous delivery. Safely and quickly in a sustainable way. So this is where, DevSecOps or is it CD or what have you. Safely means secure. It means compliant. All of those things. Quickly, but please, it's a very important metric of build time, of time to live. How long does it take me between a code commit and production? That's very important. But please don't optimize for that only. If you have a decent sized service and you tell me that the pipeline can run in 2 minutes, I'm gonna call foul because that means you're probably not running all the security tests and you're probably not running some other things. And every test needs to be run on every build. So safely. I said it earlier, there's no such thing as a DevOps pipeline. Please stop. And I guess I should have known my own slides. Can't deploy your system right now, you're not doing it. There's a lot of confusion around continuous delivery versus continuous deployment. There really shouldn't be. It makes it a business decision. So continuous delivery means that I can deploy anytime I want. I can go to a system right now, click a button. Continuous deployment means it happens automatically. Every time there's a change and it passes all the tests, it gets deployed. It's a business decision. Like I use Adobe Photoshop. If they switched to continuous deployment, where I got a new install every time their tests passed, I would get very, very angry. Because it's a large download that I have to bring onto my laptop and install and et cetera. So the once a week or so that they do updates is just fine. That's continuous delivery. But the rigor, the tests that are run should be exactly the same. I hear people saying continuous delivery is a stepping stone to continuous deployment because I don't have all the tests yet. No, it's not. Neither one's ever done. You're always adding new things, it's evolving, that sort of thing. But the difference is just, is it fully automatic or not? That said, continuous integration is a prerequisite. So there's a lot of us that don't like when people type CI/CD, because it implies that CD is just a couple extra steps on the end of the pipeline. It really isn't. There's a lot more to it. But continuous integration is a prerequisite. Jez and our chief scientist, Martin Fowler, wrote this several years ago. The continuous integration certification test. For the ThoughtWorkers in the room, the inside joke is ThoughtWorks is not a big fan of certifications. So they chose the term on purpose. But it's every developer commits at least daily to the shared mainline. Not a branch. Okay. Every commit triggers an automated build and test. And if build and test fails, it's repaired within 10 minutes. Pretty rare to see teams fit that 10-minute mark, but that's, Martin and Jez are a lot smarter than me, and that's what they wrote as the test. That said, there's no such thing as a best practice. Okay, the best thing for your team is different than the best thing for my team, which is different from the best thing for her team. Okay, so this is a term that inside ThoughtWorks we really try to avoid. The term we use instead is something called a sensible default, and it goes through clicks really fast. Sorry. Okay, and again, I'm not going to read the whole slide to you, but I wanted to do all the text in there. And this is off our internal website. I hope I'm not going to get in trouble because I don't think there's anything proprietary here. But we have a sensible default of trunk-based development. So every team member integrates to change from their working copy to a single trunk every time a day, or at least once a day, et cetera. We're not saying you never branch. Of course, with today's distributed version control systems, Git and what have you, almost the first thing you ever do. I mean, when I'm working on text, I'll branch it first. But it goes back into main at least every day. The next one is a fast automated build. So again, don't read too much into this. Don't try to get one with a 2-minute build or what have you, but you also don't want 2 hours. You do want fast feedback. You want to know what's happening. Whole team aware of the build status, and the team monitors that build duration. If you make a small change and all of a sudden your build duration goes from 3 minutes to 6, you probably introduced a performance issue. Okay, so watch those things. It does matter. This is not the same thing as the next slide, which is a fast automated pipeline. Because a pipeline isn't just the build. It is security things. It is those sorts of things. The key thing I want to pull out here is, I think the 4th bullet down here, is that deployable artifacts are built exactly once. At no point in your pipeline should you be rebuilding something. Okay, if you have if you're using a compiled language and you're compiling it at the beginning, if you're using Java, for example, and you come up with your jar file, at no point do you build another jar file. If there's a change because it passed or something failed down the thing, you rebuild it at the beginning and start from the beginning. You want to make sure the artifact deployed is exactly the same thing throughout. And then automated measures for configuration drift in environments. Keith talked a lot. I mean, infrastructure as code and so forth. This is probably, by the way, the setting up of these pipelines, the systems at least, might be a different team again, because the infrastructure teams. Okay, so that's the continuous delivery book I've talked about quite a bit. Also, Dave Farley, the co-author of it, came out with a new book last year about building better software faster that I highly recommend. Dave has a incredible mind, and also a very active YouTube channel if that's your preferred method of learning. So definitely more research to do on that topic. I did not look at a clock. Okay. Let's talk about platforms a little bit. I'm not going to go into this as much as Keith did, of course, but I do want to cover a little bit. So first off, a little bit of statistic. So we commissioned Forrester Consulting to do a study not long ago. 74% of firms were undergoing what they called a digital transformation, which often includes things like platforms. But only 34% of the CEOs reported success. So as far as they could tell, they had these programs running, but they weren't actually successful. They weren't doing what they were meant to do. And we did a whole study, and there's a link there. I know it's very long. I'm sure we'll share links later about why that is and what they found and so forth. My team actually did a little bit of research into this as well recently. Remember I said, if you build it, you run it. Oop. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So Amazon had a cloud long before we did. One of the biggest problems we found with people not thinking that their platforms were realizing the value is they didn't agree on what a platform is. So I said towards the beginning of the talk, are we defining our words? And so we looked at this, my team looked at this and others as well, and we found that there were a few things that were a problem. If I went to developers and asked a developer, what is a platform? The vast majority said a developer-focused infrastructure platform, a lot like what Keith was describing this morning. So a platform that was built that allows me to deploy my applications, allows me to run my pipelines, those types of things. That's what they said. Another group of users said it was a business capability platform. In other words, something that provided APIs. If I want to figure out the interest rate for a loan, here's an API I can call. And that's in a platform somewhere. Had nothing to do with development of software. It's the things that were on the platform itself. If I went to a lot of the business folks, if I went to that CEO and asked them what the platform was, they would say it was a business model. So it was an Uber or a delivery service or what have you, where people can interact together on a platform. And so if we put in for some funding, so we're going to build a platform, and we think it's going to be a developer-focused infrastructure platform so that we can do all those things. And the CEO says, sure, we'll spend that money. And then they come out later and they're like, well, wait a minute, I thought I was going to be able to interact with my vendors, and I thought I was going to be able to like drop ship and have somebody order something and have Walmart fulfill it. And where's my platform? Because they thought they were getting a platform business model. Any of these are valid, by the way. By all means, build that if that's what you need. But understand and agree on what it is you're building. If you want to learn more about this, we did a report. It comes out annually. Last year, it's called the Looking Glass. It's our looking at what the future of technology might look at. And one of the what we call lens, one of the sections is realizing the potential of platforms, and it goes into this quite deeply, where we talk about making sure that you're on the same page and agreeing on what it is you're building and so forth. And again, any of those are fine as long as everyone agrees that's what we're doing. Okay. Your product team, this is where I know early when I said everyone's in a product team and it's cross-functional and that sort of thing. The truth is you can't build it all. Okay, there was a time, and I'm sorry, somewhat sorry to say, I'm old enough to remember it, when I built an application and it was pretty much self-contained, and I put it on an operating system and I was done. And you know, a lot of us are like, oh, we have public cloud now, that's easier. It's not. Truth is, it's hard. You know, again, Keith was talking about earlier that Amazon has hundreds of services available, and that's still not really a platform. It's a bunch of building blocks that you can build a platform out of. And so it's hard. Distributed applications are hard. I'm not sure who first said it. I know it wasn't me, but they said if you build a distributed application, every outage becomes a murder mystery. Because now I have to try to figure out the tracing and what broke and where did it break and, you know, et cetera. And so again, don't build a distributed application because they're cool, because they are hard. And your product team needs to be able to focus on the product, because cognitive load, the last one there, is a real problem. So what is cognitive load? I can only keep so many things in my head. And frankly, as I get grayer, that number goes down. And so I can't be thinking about what changed in the latest version of Kubernetes and thinking about what my customer needs to buy the right shoes. Okay. And I don't want to worry about the security bulletin that came out for something unless I'm the security product team. I want, you know, people to be relating to those things. And so when we say you build it, you run it, when we say self-organized teams, we say self-contained teams, empowered teams, all of those words, those are very, very important. But please don't be under the illusion that somebody on your team is going to be an expert at Kubernetes and an expert at your user base, unless you're selling Kubernetes, I guess. Okay, so that's a thing we really need to keep in mind. Also, like I said, the product teams need to be customer focused. And if I'm worried about that other thing, my focus isn't going to be there. So I talked about earlier, repeat slide, the customer management, order management, inventory, all of that is owned by these product teams. So is the platform. Your platform is a product. Your developer-focused infrastructure platform is a product. Your customer is the folks above. Okay? So if you're the people that are building the platform, that are doing the automation, that are buying Keith's book, et cetera, keep in mind that it does matter what they're running on it. Keith, in his talk this morning, mentioned an example, and I think I already referenced it, where they went to a customer and the infrastructure people were like, we don't care what apps they're running. You need to. Because if they're running certain applications with certain features and need certain capabilities, it's your job as their vendor to provide what they need. We often use a phrase in the industry, I think inside ThoughtWorks and I think other places, called the paved road. What that means is that we will provide for you a path that is smooth and mostly problem-free. That if you're within these boundaries, you can drive down the paved road. but we're not going to stop you from driving down the dirt road. If the platform team isn't providing what you need, by all means, do something else. They don't have an exclusive. So I think another thing Keith, I think, we referred to is that we don't have a central team that builds a platform. You must use it and you must only do what they say. An organization and the teams need to be able to react. It's far more important that I have scalability and reliability for my financial systems than it is that I have the systems that create the memes for my chat. Okay, so there's different levels of risk, there's different level of need, and the platform teams need to respond to them with all the things that being a customer and being a product implies. Okay, so what should your platform be doing? It's allowing your product teams to focus on innovation. They get to focus on their customer, solving new problems, solving them in interesting ways. I know I was talking to somebody earlier, and when the COVID pandemic hit where I live, there was everything shut down. All the retailers had to stop, like most of the world. And then a certain amount of time later, they said, okay, you can do outside curbside, what we called it, pickup. You can let people drive up to the door, get their purchases, and drive away. There were companies that were great, and they had that live within a few days. There were other companies that it took them months. And some of those companies, half the time you'd show up to the curb and they'd actually be out of stock of the thing you bought. Okay, so allow them to focus on innovation, on what they're doing, and not worry about the version of Kubernetes. Lower the cognitive load. I'm not going to drill more into that. Enable higher quality solutions. If a qualified product team is running the platform, they're probably going to run it better than somebody who's doing Kubernetes as a side job. And so it means most of the time the applications will also be higher quality. Unintended maybe, consequence maybe, but usually happens. And increased reliability. People that know how to run Kubernetes well, or who know how to run AWS or Google Cloud or Azure, whatever it is well, are going to hopefully create more reliable platforms. This is an example from the United States. Apologies, I should have probably found a local one, but there's an organization called cloud.gov. It's the United States government. There's a bunch of rules if a government organization wants to run on the public cloud. These are there are boxes there of what the rules are, but I think it's like 135 different tests that they have to pass. Everything from network security to operating systems, et cetera. And so one of the organizations stood up this thing called cloud.gov. And if you were I think it's medium security or lower organization, you can use cloud.gov. And if you use one of their what's called a supported build pack, so they've come up with specific versions of Java or specific versions of C# or whatever they happen to be. If you use one of their build packs, you create your application code, and that's the only thing you're responsible for in order to meet what's called the FedRAMP or the regulations there. They will cover the other 120 of them or whatever it is. They will make sure it's properly versioned. They will make sure that the underlying operating systems are secure, that the required logging is in place, all of that. So the developer teams just get to work. That's the paved road. The dirt road next to it is, I'm going to do my own build pack. So I'm going to use a version of Java, a version of Ruby, or whatever that you didn't think of. I'm going to do that. But that means I'm responsible for more of it. And then the third one, it looks equal here on this chart, but it's really not, is the custom image. So I want to do my own Docker image. If you do that, now there's, Docker images have an operating system, and so you have more things there. But the point is they give you options. And which option you choose, it depends on your risk, your skills, et cetera. And so really, it's really, really important for empowering these organizations. Okay, so as I mentioned, only have to change one thing. It's everything. And just to summarize, so small cross-functional teams with a product focus that encourages them to be customer focused and customer driven. Most of us are in commercial companies that are doing a thing because we're getting paid for the thing. And the better we do the thing, the more we get paid. And I like my car, but I wouldn't mind having a nicer one. So there's nothing wrong with that, okay? Architecture, I'll call it small piece architecture, but independently deployable units, whether those be microservices or something else, but they're organized around business capabilities. Something your small cross-functional team can build, therefore the relationship. Platforms, Sorry. Thank you. No, I'm not going to click. I'm just going to stop. Platforms would enable teams to focus on their products in a secure, compliant, and reliable way. And then continuous delivery using sensible defaults. Please stop using the term best practice. Good friend of mine, J. Paul Reed, uses recommended practice. Call it whatever you want, but there is no single best practice. But we want to ensure rapid feedback and quality. It's not continuous delivery to deploy fast. It's not continuous delivery to show off. It's continuous delivery to ensure rapid feedback and quality. And with that, I will say thank you.